This is my petition to bring the write-ins back for Goodreads Choice Awards. Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brie and this is For Pause and a Book. If you've been around on the book internet for a while, you know that the Goodreads Choice Awards used to have write-in votes. So you would have your first round of them and you could actually write in a vote rather than just picking the top 20. I don't remember what year they stopped doing it. It has been several years. But I have some recommendations that Goodreads should have put on the list. Some Goodreads snubs, I guess you can call it. I will give credit to Goodreads. I think that this year is probably the most diverse that I have seen as far as non-white authors, less so in the queer author space, specifically in romance. We're going to talk about that, but I will say that there is more diversity than there has been in previous years, specifically last year. Last year it was so white. So white. There are more POC authors in all of the groups. I didn't do like the actual numbers, but like just at first glance, it looks like there's a lot more non-white authors, which is great. However, we all know that this is like the top 20. And so who knows if it's going to stay that diverse when we go to our top 10, because we know how publishing is. Regardless, you know, we'll give Goodreads the props. Like, could it be better? Yeah, sure, of course, but it's better than like one POC author that we have had in previous years. So I'm going to talk about some of the 2024 releases that I have read this year that were not on the Goodreads Choice Awards, because I've only read 15 of the top 20 in each category, which is not a lot. Weirdly enough, also, like, I consider myself a romantasy reader, a fantasy reader, and a romance reader, but the top two categories that I've read from this year are mystery and thriller and horror. So I don't know what that says about me. I want to talk about some of the books that I think should have been on there, could have been on there. I'm going to break it out by genre, so we're going to start with horror. There are two Darcy Coates books that came out this year that I think like should have been on there. Darcy has been on there in the past. I don't think that The Hollow Dead should have been on there per se. I did really enjoy this book, but this is the fourth book in the Gravekeeper series, and I don't think any of them have been on there before. But, you know. But also, Ghost Camera came out this summer, and while this is originally part, like the first story, the Ghost Camera story, is part of like her original short stories, she did add some new stuff on here, so I think it still should be considered, and this was fantastic. Yes, it's a short story collection, but it's still good. And you know what? Stephen King has a short story collection in there, so why can't Darcy? I know that Darcy has been nominated for, I know it was Gallows Hill a couple of years ago. I don't know what other books she's been nominated with, but listen, this one was good. We gotta give Darcy her props. And then one that could have been like sci-fi or horror, so I'm gonna put it here because it's the only sci-fi I would have had, but Ghost Station by S.A. Barnes. This is an isolated horror. They're on a planet, like abandoned planet. It's terrifying, it's horrifying. It's got a lot of like psychology analysis, like the way that your brain works, which is one of my favorite types of sci-fi horror blends. I do personally think that Dead Silence was better, but Ghost Station was an aardvark book, so I'm actually really surprised it wasn't on there. But the one I am most upset about, American Rapture by C.J. Lead. Okay? Now listen, I might have recency bias because I just read this and I loved it and it was this fantastic dystopian story, but I think this is what the world needs right now. Not gonna lie. This is like very culturally appropriate, very relevant to today's world. I would have very much loved to see this. I actually would have had a hard time voting if this one would have been on there, because I wouldn't have known what to vote for, this one or Bury Your Gaze, which is the one I ended up voting for. Okay, I only have one romantasy book. I realized that while I read a lot of romantasy, because I'm kind of just getting into it, I read a lot of backlist, a lot of books from last year, which is fine, which is fine. It means that next year I'm gonna have a lot of new releases. But anyways, that being said, there is one on here that I know realistically would not have made the list, but it's my favorite book of the year, and so I wanted it to be. City of Mirth and Malice by Alexis Menard. This is my favorite duology of the year, and this one came out, I want to say, in May. Listen, this duology is everything. Everything, okay? Kaz Brecker with a metal hand. They do fun things with a metal hand, okay? But it's also like a steampunk fantasy. It's not fae, which like is what the majority of romantasy is. It's got like this steam engine, like train, like she owns a train dynasty. It's a whole thing. This book is phenomenal, and I would like to know where I need to send my complaint letter to Goodreads, because this should have been on there. And then I have 2 fantasy books that the authors have been on in the past. First off, Mislaid in Parts Half Known by Shonda McGuire. I know that not every Wayward Children book ends up on the Goodreads Choice Awards, but this one was like universally pretty well loved. Like not everybody's favorite, but I'm like surprised that it didn't at least make the top 20. And I don't know if it's just because it came out so early in the year, but I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. The fantasy selection was weak this year. The top 20 fantasy books are weak. It's unimpressive. So I'm really, really surprised that this one didn't get on there. And then the other one I think could have been like fantasy or horror, but An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. This I definitely think is more fantasy. This is dark academia. It's vampires. It is like a vibes book. It's a mood. Like honestly, read this in the winter. For sure, because like, or like, you know, right now, November, late fall. But S.T. Gibson has been chosen for a Goodreads Choice Awards before. She won, I want to say it was like 4th place or something like that for horror for A Dowry of Blood. And while I don't think this one has been as well loved as A Dowry of Blood, it's interesting that this one, especially in, like I said, a very, very weak fantasy class, that this one was not chosen. My largest list of gripes definitely comes in the romance section. Now, I'm not going to do a check and see if these ones even met the criteria as far as being above 3.5. I'm not going to, because they're all books that I loved and should have been on there. Either like have been on in the past, or we would have just had a little bit more diversity. I think romance is probably the place where we saw the least amount of diversity. That and romantasy. There's a lot of white authors on the romantasy list, but romance specifically, we had some more POC authors. The queer representation, absolutely not. Like The Pairing by Casey McQuiston is the only queer romance that I know of that's on there. And there were some good queer romances that came out this year. So we're going to talk about some of them and discuss, okay? I'm going to do this in order of like least likely to most likely that they should have been on the list. The first one being The Friendship Study by Ruby Barrett. This was a 5-star book for me. This could potentially be on my top books of the year. This has a lot of mental health representation, ADHD representation, but also the male main character is bisexual, which is not something that you see very often in romance. So we need more of that representation in here. Then I know that Katie Robert has been like hit or miss as far as the Dark Olympus books being in the romance awards. I think Electric Idol was in there 2 years ago, but then I can't remember if there were any in there last year, but she did have 2 2024 releases. Midnight Ruin came out in January, and then Dark Restraint came out in August. This one was my favorite of the 2, obviously, like of these, because this one I only gave 3 stars, I think, and this one was either 4.5 or 5. And like if we're doing it based off of, because she always has 2 in the same year that come out, so if we're going off of the history, because Electric Idol and Wicked Beauty came out in 2022. So Electric Idol was like the first half release. So this one could have been in it. I don't know. Listen, they're queer romances. Goodreads, do you hate queer people? Speaking of which, I know this one just came out. So like this is why I don't think this one would have been on here, or like why it potentially couldn't have been. However, Iris Kelly was on there last year and it came out right about the same time. And that was a 3rd book in a series. So do you hate queer people? On this list is the only one I have not read yet, and I have heard mixed things about it. Not everybody's loving this one, but like, I wanted some representation, please. Alexandra Belfiore, Truly Madly Deeply. This book was phenomenal. Phenomenal. It had a lot of discussion of like difficult familial relationship and trying to come to grips with like being queer as an adult and coming out as queer as an adult and like just discovering yourself. This, so good. So good. Listen, so good. What? Why? This was phenomenal, okay? This has discussions of grief and dealing with the loss of an important person in your life. Like they are watching it happen. You are watching it happen as the reader. You know, they are taking their beloved teacher on a road trip across the country so that he can see the sights for the last time before he dies. And then also, you know, they fall in love along the way. And then these last 2, like they had special editions, okay? Like these are the Afterlight editions of this book. Do you hate plus size people, Goodreads? because this book was phenomenal. This book definitely will make my best books of the year. This has such accurate depiction of depression and anxiety, and this was so good. But it was an Afterlight book, so like we have special editions. Why wasn't this nominated? And then this one I think is like the biggest snub, because Tessa Bailey has been on this in the past, but Fangirl Down was not on here. That's weird. That's weird to me, that Tessa Bailey did not have a book on this list. She almost always has a book on the list when she writes a book. So not having this one on here was weird. And she actually had 2 books come out. She had this one and The Au Pair Affair. Now, I didn't like The Au Pair Affair, but I did really like this one. It was good. It was fun. It was a good time. So anyways, those are some of the books that I think should have been on the Goodreads Choice Awards. What about you? What books did Goodreads miss this year? And if you are not feeling chatty, let's do the golf emoji. There's like a golf ball or a golf club, something, I don't know. Do one of those. If you want to see some of the vlogs where I talked about these books in depth, specifically the ones that I absolutely loved and gave 5 stars, I'm going to have one here and one here for you. That's all I have for you today. If you are new here and you have not yet subscribed, there's a little button that you can do so down below the video. If you'd like to hang out with me more, the links to my Instagram, Goodreads, Twitter, and my Patreon are linked in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!